To celebrate Bob Dylan's birthday, we've compiled a Gear Club episode that offers a behind-the-scenes look into Dylan's life and music. Bob has been described as a shapeshifter, a song and dance man, and the Shakespeare of our time. Over his 60-plus year career, he's written more than 500 songs that have been covered by over 2,000 artists. He's played nearly 4,000 concerts. He's won 38 Grammys, an Oscar, and a Nobel Prize in Literature. But who is this guy? What's he like to work with? Listen in as Chris Shaw, David Mansfield, Toby Scott, Thom Panunzio, and Steve Addabbo share their recollections of the man on stage and in the studio. First up is Chris Shaw, who recorded and mixed many albums with Dylan, including Love and Theft and several volumes of the Bootleg series, a collection of live and studio outtakes, 17 volumes and counting. Chris talks about how he came to work with Bob, managing Dylan's unconventional recording style, and Bob's unique take on mixing.
Some of the records you worked on are, in my opinion, some of the most modern sounding records in a bizarre way.
Okay. Which is what we weren't going for that, but if you think they're modern.
No, well, to me they are. To me they are.
Okay.
Well, for Bob Dylan they are.
Okay.
Well, I got to point out, Stuart only listens to records from 1920.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, I do actually. Yeah. But how did you get that gig? Right, exactly.
There you go.
He's proving that now.
We constantly were listening to old records.
Bet.
Really?
I bet.
Oh yeah, that was the whole thing.
Wow.
But God,
what was the first record you did with him?
I did Love and Theft.
Right.
Well, actually, no, the very first thing I did with Bob.
Such a great record.
All right, I'll tell you the whole Bob story. The whole how I got to work with Bob. It's kind of weird. He was on tour he was doing his tour like in 2000 or 99. He was doing a double headliner with Paul Simon. They came to New York and they had like the whole weekend off, and he got asked to do a song for a movie soundtrack. And he'd also been talking to his manager, Jeff Rosen, a wonderful guy.
Yep. Who, by the way, still works with
he's been his guy
forever.
Forever. And one of the nicest,
absolutely,
funniest, like no bullshit guy on the planet. I love the guy.
Yep.
And so Bob was also making noise. Like I think I got enough songs for a new record, So like, let's go to New York, and he was going to produce the record himself. Let's do the soundtrack. Let's find an engineer, and then if just one thing goes, the one song goes good, we'll use it for the record. But I didn't know that, So at Columbia, there's this A&R guy, or there was Steve Berkowitz.
Sure,
Steve, Steve's another awesome guy. Steve is giving me every time this phone rings, and Steve, it's a great gig. Right. So Berkowitz is like, maybe you should try working with this guy Chris. He's like did some Jeff Buckley stuff with me. He did some Sean Colvin for me. He's worked with Sophie B. Hawkins. He's naming all these singer-songwriters, and Rosen's just like, Bob's worked with all those guys. The last thing he wants to do is work with another singer-songwriter engineer. And he's like, well, has he done anything else? He's like, well, yeah, he worked with Public Enemy, and blah, blah, blah. And like Jeff is a big Public Enemy fan. Him and his kids love Public Enemy, and Bob's a big fan of Chuck D and the lyrics, and he's like, well, at the very least, I'll have some good stories. Let's try this guy. So
at the very least,
that's kind of like Rosen's thing. That's the way he looked at it. And so we booked out Clinton recording. I booked Clinton recording sight unseen, right? Because I knew they had a Neve, and they did like union gigs, like the Emmys and stuff like that. So I knew the maintenance would be top notch, and the room would be really big, and we probably wouldn't have any problems. When we get there, the band shows up. I set them up in a circle. Bob shows up. We tracked this song, and he's like, no, let's try it like this. And he changed the arrangement and changed the key and the tempo and does another take. No, let's try it like this. And they do it like a New Orleans shuffle. I go, yeah, that sounds good. He goes out there, recuts the vocal like for one lyric. He sends Charlie Sexton out there to do an acoustic guitar overdub, and then we do a shaker overdub. And like, he's like, okay, yeah. So, and we're done. It's like 6, He's like, okay, well, let's just do a quick mix and get out of here. I'm like, fine, great. So I had the assistant throw a DAT in a DAT machine, I do a quick rough mix. I bring Bob back in. He listens to it. He goes, it sounds all right, but I can hear everything. I can close my eyes and point at the guitar, and I can point at the cymbals. I'm like, and I'm thinking, and that's a bad thing. It's like, just kind of mush it up together and like put my voice through an amp or something like that. And and I'm like, all right, fine. I send them out. And by this time, the roadies packed everything up. So I grabbed one of my distortion boxes and put his vocal through it, and a little bit of the snare drum, and he comes in, he goes, yeah, that sounds good, where's the shaker? He's like, I point at the fade, he's like, he just cranks it all the way up, and we run to the past the shaker crazy, it's like the cowbell skit in Saturday Night Live, it's just like, it's all shaker.
More shaker.
More shaker. And then, I print it to DAT, and I make him a cassette, and I figure, okay, we're done, Rosen calls me up 2 days later. He's like, where's the half inch? I called the studio. They can't find the half inch for this. I'm like, there is no half inch.
It's a rough mix.
He's like, yeah. Bob said, let's do a mix. Let's do a quick mix and get out of here. And like I could hear him face palming on the other end of the line. He's
It's
like,
a final.
He's like, man, that's on me.
Right.
He's like, basically, Bob says, let's do a quick mix. He really means let's do a mix quick.
Right.
Get the hell out of here. And I'm like, oh man. I'm like, okay, man. Well, if you want me to, I can go back and redo it. I mean, there was literally just a faders up mix with a little reverb because no. Bob will hear a difference. I'll just make sure I run off this, make a couple copies of that so we have an archive of it. And it wound up being that movie, The Wonder Boys, and he wins the Oscar for it.
Wow.
I'm watching the Oscars, and he wins, and I get up, and I slam my head against the wall. I was like, I did that to a dad. I did that to a dad. I can't believe I did that to a dad. So from that day on, I always had like a 1-inch, 2-track,
Always.
15 ifs, no noise reduction. Every mix, one to that. And then 6 months later, we did Love and Theft. And
That's amazing.
Where did you do that?
we did it at Clinton. Like we didn't want to ruin a good thing. So we did it at Clinton again, and that was all the band on the floor.
So when you say band on the floor, is it literally band and amps in the room? And
in
is
the
he
room.
singing in the
and
room?
He's in the room.
So what kind of mic are you putting on him so you can kind of get the vocal?
I try. He was Bob like he loves all the old stuff. He's like he's pointing at 44. I want to sing on that, so I set it up, and of course it's great.
Like fucking drums everywhere,
right? And at one point I'm just like, Bob, I think I got the mic for you, and I think Charlie Sexton actually recommended the SM7s. I threw an SM7 on it. Super
that
rejection.
is such a great fucking live singer.
Yeah, it's the best mic in the world.
It really is.
It's the best rock and roll mic.
Isn't it the Whitney Houston mic? I think that was like her go-to.
It's the Michael Jackson mic for sure.
Yeah,
right. All of Thriller was done.
It was like $400 fucking bucks.
Yeah. Exactly.
Fuck yeah.
And I set the band up in a circle with the band facing into the control room and had Bob with his back to the control room. So that way, if I'm running around, he doesn't get distracted and stuff like that. Right. And that's all it was. So I would get the band playing, and we do a take, and I'd be like, I'd kind of like sneak out a low gobo and kind of put it someplace in front of, over the course of the day, I just drag another gobo, and I keep doing it until Bob was like.
Over the course of the session, Chris is moving furniture.
Building a new studio.
I'm moving low gobos, and I just kept on doing it until Bob would be like, hey, so what's with all the isolation? I'm like, okay, we're done. And that's basically how I'd run,
Right.
And so the sound on Love and Theft is really the spill.
Yeah.
Right.
I made the mistake.
No room mics because everything else was
everything's
spilled.
Everything's everywhere. And I made the mistake of trying to mix it normally. Like I get the rhythm section, the guitars, and I throw up the vocal mic, and then the whole mix would fall apart.
Right.
And so I'd be like, okay, well, let's reverse engineer this. So I put the vocal up first, get something going on, and then bring in the drums, and then bring in the guitars, and bring in the bass.
I got to say that's one of my favorite all-time.
Do you do that? But reverse engineer. Do you ever do like vocal first?
Yeah.
I do it when I can't figure out how to mix the song.
Right.
Like if I do a mix and like I get the vocal and I'm like, that's not happening. So pull the faders down, try again.
Right.
Like maybe just start with the vocal.
But also he's one of the greatest singers of all time.
Chris Shaw is?
I know.
And Chris.
Exactly.
But Bob is.
Listen to his voice. It's great.
I mean, did you experience that working with him? That this guy, he's not, Tony Bennett or Frank Sinatra, but
as a gag, like later on, we did Love and Theft on Analog, and I did Modern Times on Pro Tools. And as a gag one afternoon, I threw auto-tune on his vocal just to see what it would do. And it couldn't track him. It just couldn't track him. It refused to work. It didn't glitch. It didn't do anything. It just refused to work.
Right. But
it's almost like the gods were saying, no, you can't do this.
Well, you know what? But that is true, right? I mean, if he would have had auto-tune in 1970 or 60,
exactly.
Like it would be terrible.
Yeah.
But he sings harder than people think.
I did a session with him for a compilation record years after that. Him and Mavis Staples singing on the same mic, and I was like, Bob, you got to step back, because he's got that see the nose, or he's got that mid range. It just
but he sings hard.
He belts. There's a song on Love and Theft called "Lonesome Day Blues," and you hear him just laying into it. It's
what?
Like,
that's the shuffle.
Yeah,
is
that still like
Okay, I got to tell you, that's one of my favorite records.
Oh, really?
That song is.
We were like whooping it up in the control room. Like when he was doing the takes, we were in the control room just going, yeah.
No, that's one of my.
Like everyone's like going, he hasn't sung like this in like ages.
And the drum sound on that is unbelievable, and the interplay between is it Charlie and Larry?
Charlie and Larry, yeah.
Is really, it's one of my favorite records.
Well, that was the thing about that record I loved, because we did Modern Times. At that point, Charlie was out of the band, and they brought in two other guitar players. Modern Times actually sold more, I think, and it actually was a little bit more. It got better reviews, I think. But what's interesting about Love and Theft is that Charlie and Larry are both monster players.
Yeah.
And they're really trying to get their shit in.
Yeah, right.
They want to get noticed on that record. And Bob is like putting the thumb down on, like, dude, you're not soloing while I'm singing. So
Right.
anytime Bob would stop singing,
There
one of them would try to like sneak into like a little riff.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was all this cat and mouse game going on between the two guitar players and Bob. And it wasn't like adversarial, but it was like this fun thing, you know what I mean? And so that was it. And they brought in these new guys, seasoned guys. I'm not saying like the young bloods or anything like that, but they brought in these other guys, and they were just sort of like, oh my God, it's Bob Dylan, and like Bob, oh you want me to play rhythm? Okay, I'm only going to play rhythm.
Right.
So there wasn't like this like
push and pull
that was on.
Is he reading lyrics? Or
occasionally.
Or does he know them?
No, he's got lyrics.
Right.
He's got lyrics on the mic stand in front of him.
Okay.
And when we did Love and Theft, the word came down from Bob that he wants to, like, I guess he was looking at a Robert Johnson record. He wanted to sing in the corner. He literally wanted to be singing into a corner. And we rigged up this whole thing to do that. We got the mic in there, and Jeff told me, he's like, well, he likes to play piano once in a while, so make sure you got the piano mic'd up and get a vocal mic over there in case he wants to switch. And I'm like, okay, great. So I just threw a PZM in the lid.
Right.
Thinking that we maybe would be redoing the piano later, and this would just be a reference. Well, that wound up being the piano mic for the whole record, And I had a mic there, and Bob walked in, and the band was like rehearsing something, and he kind of picked up his guitar, and he went we literally spent 3 hours setting up this corner vibe for him. We had sheets, we set it up so it looked like almost like a shack, from like on the Mississippi Delta. We vibed it out completely. And Bob walked in, he sat down with his guitar, and he kind of went into the mic a little bit while the band was playing, and he kind of got up, put his guitar down, dragged on his cigarette for a little bit, looked over his shoulder and saw the piano, and then walked over and sat down at the piano, and he never moved for the rest of the record, except for like one song where he played just the guitar. And like all of a sudden, like this thing, I had this 5-hour setup over here, and this 20-second setup over here, and that one that being like...
Is
so him.
It's so him.
Is Trying to Get to Heaven on that record? Trying to Get to Heaven Before I Close the Door?
No, that's a different one.
Oh, that's the one. That's a Lanois record.
That's the Lanois record.
Before,
yeah. And that was the other thing, like, because he's trying not to be Lanois.
He's now Jack Frost.
He's Jack Frost, and like anything that I did that reminded anything of any of the Lanois sessions, he was like put the kibosh on.
Right.
So we would like the first song we did. Bob's like, okay, I'm gonna redo the vocals on that. I'm like, all right, give me a minute, I'm gonna get you a headphone mix. He's like, no, man, I don't want to wear headphones. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get some monitors out there. He goes, oh man, Daniel would do that with me all the time. I don't like doing the monitor thing. I'm like, well, fuck, how am I gonna?
So what's he gonna do?
How am I gonna overdub a vocal? So I thought about it for a while, and what I wound up doing is I sent the whole band back out there with Bob, and the band would wear headphones, and the band would play along with the track, right?
And then I
would just drop in the vocal on it. So he'd be singing to the band, playing to the pre-recorded tape, and then I would just drop in the vocal. So if you get your hands on it.
But did he know that they weren't playing?
Yeah, no, that was it. He didn't want to play to a playback. He wanted to play to the band.
Right.
He wanted to overdub to the band.
So wait, how does output work with that shit?
Because I put the whole band on, I'm on sync, on the sync head. I got him on record ready, and the band's just monitoring on headphones to the playback of their old track, but they're playing along with it live in the room. So they're just basically double tracking themselves.
That is the most expensive headphone mix ever.
Yeah, exactly. So I just sent the band back out there. I say, hey, look, guys, just rhythm, no licks, no nothing, because I don't want any weird shit going on in the mic. Right. And if you get your hands on the multi-track, you'll hear all of a sudden spots. There's like 4 guitars, instead of 2. And if you
I may have noticed that.
And if you take Love and Theft and you bring it into Pro Tools and put like a real shitty limiter on it, like like an L1 or something like that, and smack the hell out of it, you'll hear it. You'll hear like the spill,
the leakage on his vocal.
Yeah, on his vocal mic.
That's
so the
incredible.
whole thing was all about leakage. And then on the next record, what I did is I set up an SM7 about 2 feet to the side and like a foot behind him that just recorded bleed. So if in case he wanted to punch in and didn't want the band back out there, I had something I could I can fake the bleed that would be missing. So. Wow. It's weird. Like working with him is like working with nobody else. You don't do anything a standard way. No isolation. And you just got to be ready for everything.
Yeah.
And like Bob would change the arrangement, and you had basically like 2 minutes to like dial in something. And I had like literally there would be like 20 patch cables hanging out off the patch bay with pieces of tape on them for the alternate mics. Because we didn't have enough inputs. So it'd be like, okay, we're doing that. Repatch. I had 3 assistants on that gig. Actually 2. I had one in the control room and I had one out in the live room. Just because there was so much shit to keep control of. Like I didn't want to be worrying about the patch bay and getting sound and worrying about headphone mixes. Every once in a while I would sneak out out into the live room during a take and tweak Bob's headphone mix without even knowing it.
Yeah.
I like get up behind him and I plug in a second headphone mixer. He doesn't know how to use a headphone mixer. He just turn all the knobs willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And I go out there and all the knobs be decked, And so I went out there once and snuck up behind him, put on his pair of headphones, plugged into his mixer, and very slowly tweaked the mix till it sounded better, and there was a little panning, and then I snuck back into the room.
That's amazing.
And sit back in, and the take would finish, and Bob would be like, well, I don't know what happened, but like about halfway through that take, man, it sounded great.
That's incredible. He's going to know what happens now.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff Rosen's going to tell him.
And the band would like just fall over laughing, so. Yeah.
Well,
it was interesting.
Those are very important records to me.
Yeah,
that
it's
you
an
worked on.
incredible record.
And just the, from an engineering point of view, the psychological issue of dealing with someone who's maybe one of the greatest poets.
Right.
Yeah.
And, were you nervous going in?
Well, that was the thing. Growing up, Bob Dylan never really was much on my radar. I mean, obviously, I was aware of who he was,
Right.
and I think I owned Highway 61.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think I bought Blonde on Blonde. I think I listened to it once, and I thought it was just too wordy. And I bought Time Out of Mind because Lanois had done it. And I was really interested, to see what Lanois would do. Right. So when I got the gig, I was like, wow, this is a big gig, but I wasn't like nervous, like, oh my God. It's like if somebody said, hey, you're going to be working with McCartney tomorrow, then I'd be like, oh my God, I was a huge Beatles fan. Right. But so I was kind of, I wouldn't say nonchalant, but I was just pretty calm about it until the very moment I had to get a vocal sound on him. Right. I got the band all set up, and Bob walks in. Hey, Bob, can I do a mic check? He's like, yeah. And I'm leaning over to Neve, and I got my hand on the mic pre. And he starts to sing, and like instantly, like 2 gallons of sweat just secreted out of my body. I'm like, oh my God, that's fucking Bob Dylan, And like I just freaked out. And what was so nerve wracking about that working with him was that like I work with Weezer, I've worked with all these other bands, and like. But you do a Bob Dylan record and everyone's going to review it. Like it's going to be in Rolling Stone, it's going to be in Newsweek, it's going to be in Time, it's going to be USA Today. And like if I did the bad Bob Dylan record, I'll never hear the end of it.
Except one thing, that's one of the best sounding Bob Dylan records.
Well, that was the thing. I was so I had like I knew I was like I got to bring my A game. There's no half stepping here.
That was my point about it sounding modern. Like. Those old records were reviewed based on his lyrics and his performance, but this was like a new sound for him in a way, at least for me. And I have everyone from the beginning.
Right.
And I was just really blown away by it.
And I think that might have been the advantage I had was that I wasn't a Dylanologist,
Right.
I wasn't a Dylan fan, so I didn't have like this, I guess, baggage or whatever.
Right.
I didn't have like this, like, oh God,
But you brought a new thing to it.
The only thing I was thinking of is like, Bob has worked with all these amazing engineers. Now my name's gonna get tacked onto the bottom of this list, and oh my God, I got, I can't fuck this up. Otherwise, I'm gonna be that guy, And that was really what drove me the entire time. And
it was a well-received record.
Yeah, and it was. I'm telling you, we had so much fun making that record. It was really a lot of fun. Modern Times is a really good record, but we had more, I think Love and Theft was just, everyone was just having such a great time. Including Bob, yeah. In fact, we basically did a song a day, and I did a rough, finished, so we 13 songs, 13 days, and I did a rough mix at the end of every night, and then on the last day of tracking, Bob was like, "Oh, let's get some rough mixes together so I can hear what we got." I was like, "No, I got rough mixes, man." And we played the whole thing for him, and there were like 3 songs that he listened to the rough mixes, like, "Oh man, these are great. You don't have to mix these over. We'll just use these mixes." And we had booked a day per song to mix, and Bob couldn't be there for the first 3 days. So I talked to Jeff. I said, "Well, look, why don't I just take a crack at beating those 3 rough mixes he likes while Bob is gone, and if I beat him, great. If I don't, we won't have lost anything, instead of trying to, that way we can keep on schedule."
Right.
And I wound up beating 2 of them, but one of them actually wound up being the rough mix.
Right.
It's called Moonlight. It was just the faders up, and it was done, and I'm ultra proud of that mix. It just sounds really, because the thing about doing a rough mix after you track is like you're in the vibe, and it's just sort of like, and like one thing might be a little too loud, but it's, it's like that Tom Petty track, Mary Jane's Last Dance. They did it after the tambourine overdub, and the tambourine is ridiculously loud, but the track is, who cares? It's awesome.
Right.
Yeah. It was all analog, and switching with the Pro Tools, that was the other big thing. Like once he learned he had infinite amount of takes for vocals, I kind of created a monster. He got really into it.
He did.
Yeah, because the reason why I did it is there was a lot of editing on Love and Theft. He wanted to, his whole thing about editing, we didn't edit takes so much as that he wanted to rearrange verses. He'd be sitting down after he do the take and be like, well, this story makes more sense if I put this verse here and that verse over there. Is there any way we can edit it? So there's a lot of...
So you move in verse A to verse B.
And verse 7 becomes 2, you know. And, you know, with no click track and everything, that's a real testament to the band, you know, because it was just rock steady. And
who's the drummer on those records?
On Dave Kemper was...
Dave Kemper.
Dave Kemper was on Love and Theft, and then George Rosselli on the other one. And what was...
Tony's on.
And Tony's, Tony, oh God, Tony's awesome. He's been with Bob forever.
Right.
But when we went to Modern Times, I realized he's gonna do. If we're gonna be doing that much editing, I can do. I told Jeff, I was like, I can probably do it faster on Pro Tools. I'll record analog at the same time, you know, for the first couple of days, in case he's like, oh, I don't like this. But literally, Bob, we did a song and we did 2 takes, and Bob's like, I want to edit this version, you know, for the beginning and this version for the ending. And he started walking into the control room really slowly while smoking a cigarette. By the time he got there, I was done, you know. And I played it for him. He's like, you're not done. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. And I played it. And he's like, wait, I mean, wow, that's amazing. He's like, all right, let's do some more takes. You know?
He was into it.
And he was like kind of into the fact, the speed of it. That was like, because he hates waiting.
Yeah, I'm sure.
He just is not.
That's another pressure on you is, you know, he's going to get frustrated if he's got to wait.
Well, we did a song for some other movie, and I begged Jeff. I was like, "Look, could we track it on like Saturday and have me mix it on Sunday because it's just I'm flying out to LA. I'm going to be exhausted." Just, you know. And they had Bob come and show up at 4, full well knowing that he'd show up at 3. You know, and so I'm at the studio and I'm mixing, and Bob shows up early. Obviously, I'm like 5 minutes away from finishing, you know. And he comes in, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just finishing up the mix, Bob. No, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm trying to make it sound better, Bob. And better than what? I'm like, no, and like, I'm just like, you know, I was like, Bob, give me 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes, Bob, and I'll be done. He leaves and he comes back in 5 minutes later. He's like, are you not done yet? And I'm like, oh, Jesus, you know, like, and like, he's like, well, you're the genius. He sits down on the couch and he's like, I know you're the genius here, but let me tell you what I know about mixing. And in my head, I'm just screaming, fuck you, I just need 5 minutes and I'll be done, you know. But then another thing, I was like, well, yeah, Bob's going to tell me what he thinks, how he, what his view of mixing is. This ought to be interesting to say the least, you know. He's like, well, you know, engineers come in and they push the kick drum fader up and they fiddle around with the knobs and, you know, IQ or whatever it is that you guys do. And it's like, now the kick drum sounds fantastic. And then they push up the snare and the same thing happens again. Snare drum sounds fantastic, and then they go down the whole line, and everything sounds fantastic except the song. What do you do? And he looks at me and he goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Give me 15 minutes, Bob. All right, I'll give you 15 minutes." So I stood there at the console, and I looked, and I took out all the EQs and all the inserts on everything except maybe the kick, the snare, and his vocal, and I just everything flat, right? And I hit play. I was on an SSL, and I had a bunch of automation running at that. It was like a long, like 7-minute song. I hit play, and I'm sitting there on the couch. I'm sitting next to my assistant, and about 5 minutes into that mix, I went, "Motherfucker,
he's right.
It sounds awesome." You know, and like, all right, that's it. You know, so you know, it's you learn from everybody, man.
Did he show up with an entourage?
No.
He would show up by himself.
It would just be him, and like he had like a driver, you know. There's a guy named Barron who works with him, and yeah, that's it, you know. But it would be the band and the whole road crew, though,
right?
You know,
right.
So,
Bob Dylan is the guy I always think about, and this is kudos to you. Where I always say I don't think I could fucking sit in that room. And work with
that's
him.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm thinking as you're telling these stories. I don't know if I
I could fucking deal with that, man. I would have a fucking mental breakdown.
I would have spilled my coffee on the console.
I do. Like, and every once in a while, I'd be sitting in that session. I'll be like, oh my, what the I literally, what do they call it? They call it imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I mean, I was literally waiting for somebody to break through into the control room door and point at me and go, "Interloper! He does not belong in that chair."
Both Love and Theft and Modern Times were mastered by our good friend Greg Calby, who we interviewed in Gear Club episode number 2. To hear more from Chris about his work with Public Enemy, Weezer, and multiple Grammy wins, check out Gear Club episode 11, available at gearclubpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. David Mansfield joined Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Revue at 19 and went on to tour and record with Dylan for many years. David gives us an inside look at life on the Rolling Thunder Revue, what it was like being on stage with Dylan, and the ups and downs of being in his band.
Back to 1975.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were 19.
I was 18, and then we hit the road in like the fall, and my birthday in September, so I turned 19, probably during rehearsals. I'm not on the record, but we were touring Behind Desire, which he had cut in New York with New York musicians, with Rob Stoner, the late Howie Wyeth, and Scarlett Rivera. The way it happened is that my girlfriend at the time was working at the very new bottom line, which, was soon going to put everybody else out of business. And so she and her girlfriend, after hours, they would go and see who else was playing at the clubs, in the village. And she saw Bobby Newirth playing at the bitter end, or was the other end at that time.
Yeah, on Bleecker Street.
On Bleecker Street. Still Paul Colby's place, but he couldn't call it the bitter end for a few years. Mm-hmm. And it was his whole scene. Bobby had all these people sort of like coming up on stage and staying. And, he had this big backup band, but then like McGuinn would drop in, and then Mick Ronson joined the band. And, it sort of felt to her kind of like a bit of a jammy or a free-for-all kind of thing. And she noticed they didn't have a fiddle player. So she gets this idea that she's going to drag me down there with my fiddle in hand and introduce me to Bobby, and I'll play with them. And that's exactly what she did and what happened. And I walked into that little toilet of a dressing room.
Yeah.
Janie goes, "Well, my boyfriend plays the violin." And he went like, "Well, take it out and let me hear what you can do," or something like that. Something humiliating and on the spot. But I did, and like, I just was on stage with him, and then he was in my life until he died. I mean, like, that was the start of a long relationship. But at one point, we all scattered, and then Bobby said something about, "Hey, I can't tell you anything, but are you free in September? And if anything comes up, let me know." And that turned out to be the Rolling Thunder Review. I showed up at SIR, and there's Dylan and Joan Baez and Roger McGuinn and Ramblin' Jack Elliott and
fucked up.
And a camera crew.
Which anyone can see to this day because of
the Scorsese film.
Yes.
Much of that footage is in that film. But, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I knew what I was stepping into, briefly before I did. So it wasn't like a... But the thing is, a bunch of us were basically in Newirth's band. But when we all got to rehearse, very quickly, everything became everything. So we backed up everybody. Dylan would do a set where he would break it down to just Stoner and Wyeth and Rivera, and they would do some Desire songs. But we had another set or two where it was the whole big band.
Like there were other sets that happened?
I mean, it was a review. I mean, like, it literally was a review. The principals, I think, at first were Newirth, Baez, Elliott, McGuinn, and Dylan. But people would come to visit, and they would sit in and then just join the tour. So pretty soon, Rick Danko was doing a set. Joni Mitchell was doing a set. We hit Canada. Gordon Lightfoot was doing a set. Ronnie Hawkins was doing a set. At its longest, it was over 4 hours by the time everybody had joined in. And by a set, I mean 4 or 5 songs, like a real set, not just 1 or 2 songs. Oh, and Bobby's set was a mini review in itself because everybody in the band would do a song. T-Bone Burnett would do a song. Steven Souls would do a song. Rob Stoner would do one. Ronnie Blakely was along with us. She was hot off of Nashville. She would do a song or two.
And would you join them? You would join them all, or?
Yeah. I mean, well, all that stuff, like the Bobby mini review, that was all of us backing up everybody.
Right.
I mean, we pretty much backed up everybody unless somebody either did a solo, like Joni Mitchell did a few songs solo. Bob did a solo set. Jack Elliott did half of his set solo. But when they were doing the band, we all played behind them.
Right. That's amazing.
So, you did a couple of Dylan tours, right? You did a couple of Rolling, they toured a couple of times.
Yeah.
And then when was Ronaldo and Clara?
Well, that was shot during those 2 tours, or the first tour, just the first tour. So the fall of 75. But then Bob and his editor, Howard Auk, locked themselves in a basement cutting room and spent 2 years cutting that thing, this way and that. I mean, and also all that footage. I mean, that's what the Scorsese film is, aside from the interviews.
Right.
It's all Ronaldo and Clara footage. So he didn't do anything between 76 and 78.
But was that your first time on a film set, or your first sort of...
It wasn't a film set, because it really had the vibe. I mean, everything was handheld. Mm-hmm. It's not like they ever set up lights, track, yada, yada. It was very guerrilla, and sometimes even home movie-ish. I mean, the scenes were improvised. There was never a shot of somebody walking towards a door, then a shot of them coming out the other side.
Right. Was it scripted?
No. And that was one of the other things that Bob invited Sam Shepard to come along to be the screenwriter. But because of what we were doing, it's like he sort of like, what the hell am I doing here? You know, it's like we had a great time with him. You know, he was part of our whole crew, but you know, at the end of it, a publisher had him like write like a little book on the kind of mostly, you know, pictures and some text about the tour. I think it was called the Rolling Thunder Logbook. But that's the only writing that came out of that Sam did for. But yeah, there was sort of some noise made about doing traditional film things, but none of them were ever done.
Right. But it's so interesting how from that band you maintained lifelong relationships. I mean, Bobby Newirth, T-Bone, Roger McGuinn.
A little while after Rolling Thunder, the second one ended, T-Bone and Stephen Souls and I formed a band called the Alpha Band. We made 3 records for Arista. It was a whole, you know, mini career. When Alpha Band was starting to wind down, Dylan came out of his editing room man cave and rehired me and Stephen Souls to be in the 78 band. And we spent all year on the road. And we were the only people from that time. He hired Rob Stoner, but he replaced Rob with Jerry Sheff sort of early on. And the band was A-list band. You know, I mean, like the late Steve Douglas played sax and flute. Alan Pasqua played keyboards.
Is this from that band?
Budokan? Yeah. The late Ian Wallace was the drummer.
Right.
Wait, what era? What record?
It's called Live at Budokan.
Right.
And the record we were touring was called Street Legal, which sort of like
right.
kind of went into the toilet, but has since been kind of rediscovered.
Right.
It was an amazing, gigantic band. And we had Bobby Hall on percussion, you know, for the Motown days, you know.
What was it like to be on stage with him? Or like, did he communicate with you, or was it just like, here's a tune, play? You know, was there any?
Well,
like, what was he like?
In those days, his working style was that he did not really communicate. He would just launch into a tune. And he wouldn't really give you direction. It was like all like the band doing head charts. So you had to be on your toes. You had to be just ready to just roll with whatever. I mean, like...
It's still like that, though, right? I mean, he's still
I don't know.
Like
I mean, like, I saw a show of his a few years back, and like, the arrangements were really tight and sounded scripted. And then I would hear these little melody things that like the steel guitar would take or the guitar would take. And I said, wait, that sounds like a Bob line. You know, I was pretty sure I could hear things that sounded like he had directed them to do stuff.
Right. Tony, my brother, our man, he was at one of the last Beacon shows like a year ago.
I was with him, yeah.
Oh, okay. But Stuart, the vibe was that everybody playing would just watch Bob just in case he changed something, right? I mean, they were all...
I'm sure that hasn't changed. And the other thing is that, like, during my tenure with him, which lasted for a long time, something that used to be rock and roll might be a waltz next time. Something that, you know, you know... keys, feels, time signatures.
Right.
We did a television special called Hard Rain. It was on NBC from the second Rolling Thunder. And like a good example of like one of the like wilder arrangements was the way he used to do Maggie's Farm. It had like all these stops in it and like rubatos, and like then it would like lurch into like a manic 4/4, and you just had to watch.
Yeah.
Vocally, I would see like when he and Joan would sing, Joan would be watching his lips. Just watching, trying to see where he was going to take an intake of breath so she would guess when he was going to start the next syllable. I used to do this thing. It was a little shticky, but it's like he would feature on all along the Watchtower. First, he would dedicate it to Jimi Hendrix. And so like the first solo he would give to Billy Cross on electric guitar, but I would take the last solo at the end on electric violin. And it was a very sort of flashy kind of approach, and every night, you know, it was always a standing ovation and all that.
Yeah. Did he ever give the band feedback?
No.
Right. Was that off-putting for you, or Or did you just assume if he was?
You just sort of got used to the vibe, and then there were some times when like he was dissatisfied, and then he would give you feedback, but it was like more like, this sucks.
Right. Right.
And it would be up to you to figure out what he didn't like.
Mm.
Oh, wow. So he wouldn't even be specific about it. He would just say...
No. And I gather that happened I've had a lot of friends who were alumni with him.
Right.
I gather that went on in various iterations of the touring band. The other thing is about Bob is that, I mean, again, I'm saying he may be different now or different periods, but I've had some experience with him or with friends of mine that have worked with him where he would be dissatisfied, couldn't really explain what it was, and he would fix it by making a change in the lineup, by getting a new musician or a new entire band.
Right.
Part of the, Rolling Thunder Review and the Rob Howe Scarlett thing, I mean, he had just come off of doing Before the Flood. He just had the band, and at a certain point, he just decided, like, rather than telling them like how to play, he's like, I'll just play with somebody else.
And so when you were on stage, would you be just focused on what you were doing, or would you actually go, I'm going to listen, like it's Bob singing a song? Would you be able to appreciate what he was doing? Because his performances on Rolling Thunder, one of the best parts of that documentary is how great his performances actually are.
Mesmerizing.
And were you able to like dial into that when you were playing, or were you just doing your thing?
No, I mean, I was affected by it emotionally. I could, for certain songs, I could have parts and I could depend on them pretty much. And other ones, I just had to watch his body language for what was going to happen next,
Right.
Whether I was doing one or the other, I was always sort of appreciating what he was doing and enjoying it.
Your playing is spectacular on that stuff. And the documentary really shows how valuable you were to that band. But it really shines in the documentary, and bless you for doing that, brother.
Yeah. They released a box set of a bunch of those shows.
Oh, yeah. They released a lot of it.
It was and a friend of mine, our friend Bill Burrs gave me that for my 60th birthday. And for months in the car, I would just put in another show. And the shows were fantastic. And it was similar set lists every time. So you just hear different versions of the songs, but they were so fucking good. And for a box set, when I first got it, which I thought, I mean, how am I going to get through this? This is like 10 or 12 different from the
shows.
Same tour. But it literally was amazing to listen. And every now and then you'd hear the nuances between the song, you know what I mean? From different nights. But I finally pulled it out of the car because I was like, all right, I got to listen to other shit now. But for 2 months, I would just listen to that every day in the car. It was so good.
Did you know, David, that they were recording the shows? Did that affect you at all?
I mean, there were certain shows that were larger shows, a couple stadium shows, where they brought in a truck, did a whole multi-track recording, and we all knew that was happening. But no, I just sort of it is what it is. I didn't really, there was a certain nature of it that was so ragtag, fly by the seat of your pants that's you went with that,
Right.
You didn't worry about making mistakes, because how would you tell that from the rest of it?
Right. But also you had you certainly had other things on your mind anyway.
Sometimes they might have been doing board tapes or something I didn't know about. I mean, like you're saying, on this set, there's, all these different concerts. Well, I don't think we used the truck for more than maybe 3 shows or something.
Wow.
But then multiple, nights of those. So there was a lot to choose from.
For more on David's work with a litany of other artists and his work scoring for film and television, listen to Gear Club episode number 91, available at gearclubpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. In this next clip, Thom Panunzio shares a few stories from his time in the studio working with Bob on his album Biograph and as a guest on the Stevie Nicks album Street Angel.
Thom, I want to show you, I was going through my old cassettes. I told you about that yesterday, and I found this one from 124.91. So me and Whitman mixed a series of dreams for Bob. And
fantastic.
He was never there. He wasn't there. We did it remote. In fact, It was so funny. We sent him the mix via like cassette, and we heard back a week and a half later that we used the wrong second verse. So I had to go back into the studio and reset the console and just print the second verse with the right lyrics. You know what I mean? And we didn't know. We had no fucking idea. Like, it was just on different tracks. The rest of the song was fine.
A lot of times they don't send instructions, you know.
Especially if you're him, right? I mean, I don't know. You know better. You were definitely way more involved.
I did work with him in the studios, and I did some things that he wasn't there for also.
Right.
But the first thing that I did for Bob was his first box set, the Biograph box set, it's called. I mixed all the unreleased material, which was the majority of the box set, but it was all things for the most part and people I'd never heard. I did that. I hadn't even met him. And I figured there'd be a lot of, going back. So I was very prepared for that. And as it turns out, he loved everything. And
that's great.
Approved every song I mixed, and it went out that way onto the box set. It was one of the easiest.
Where did you do it?
Did it in Record Plant in Studio B. I found out that he's very intelligent. He knows what he should sound like, knows what he wants to sound like. And he's not going to accept less. And you have to figure out how to make it work for him the way he wants to do it. Right. And, it reminded me of Bruce a lot. He doesn't take no for an answer.
Right.
If you're out of tracks and he wants to do another vocal, you better find one somewhere. There's no. And Bob, he had his own. He didn't have a rules book. He did it the way he reacted and felt at the moment. And after the Biograph project, I got a call from him to help him put together basically a record out of a lot of tapes he had that were incomplete, half done, just started, almost finished, whatever. And he had to deliver a record, and he needed help going through it. He was, I guess he had been going through it, and I needed another opinion, or he needed somebody to help finish them. And anyway, I got involved in that for a while, and he was working up at a studio called Skyline up in Topanga Canyon out here. And I went up there, and he decided that he wanted to pick a bunch of songs, and they needed backgrounds. So he brought the sisters in up the Skyline, and he was very excited about it, having these wonderful women sing for him. And anyway, we put the song, I forget what song up, the first song up, second song up, whatever, and the girls are out there getting the parts. They start singing along. He goes, that's great, let's do one. They start singing along, it's great. He's very excited. He goes, wow, this is great. And in the middle of all this, he gets up from sitting at the console next to me and runs out of the room and runs into the studio. And in the studio, which was just a small room, I had a mic set up. The girls were all around it. In the back of the room, like most studios, there's some gear. There's a set of drums. There's a guitar amp. There was, I think, a Epiphone electric guitar. It was sitting next to it, plugged in, nothing on, nothing ready to go, not set up to do anything, because he said, we're just going to do backgrounds for today.
Right.
And we had a lot more to do. And he runs out there and he grabs the guitar and he starts trying to play. It's not working. He looks down at the amp, he turns it on and starts blasting
while they're singing
as these girls are singing. And I'm going, okay, and he comes in and says, wow, that was fantastic. That was great. The girls are there. He goes, let's hear it back, Okay. And, you don't, especially at a time like that, you just do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out how to make it work. And he says to me, push the girls up. So, of course, I have one microphone, I push it up. What comes up with it? But this blaring guitar in the room that's not even, ready to have played. I think it probably needed to be tuned, and God knows how long it had even been sitting there. And he says to me, he goes, not the guitar, just the girls. So I knew at that point, what this was going to be. And basically what I did was he played it, and he wanted to hear it again, luckily. And I said to the girls, why don't we play it this time? Go out there and sing along. And you'll hear yourself in the headphones, but sing along. And I recorded that to kind of, I had some way of balancing and keeping the guitar lower than it needed to be. But you have to, I remember being on the road recording him live and him yelling out songs that I know in Benmont, I think it was, who was playing the keyboards. We never even, practiced that song. Right. I don't even know what key it was supposed to be in, but he's on stage and, okay, here we go, this song, kind of like Bruce, just expect you to know it and play it. And but interesting ways of making records. The only other session I did with him, I was producing a record for Stevie Nicks, the Street Angel album.
Wow.
And she covered Just Like a Woman on the record. And she said to me, before we had even recorded anything, that she was going to have Bob come in and sing on it. That was her dream. And, Stevie's a major star, why not? And she said they were friendly. So great. And I was looking forward to that the whole time we were making the record, and even thinking about parts or whatever. But you don't do that with Dylan. He just comes in and does what he does.
That's amazing.
And anyway, so it came time for Bob to come in one night, and he didn't want to sing. He did everything else, and he managed to make he played harmonica, he played guitar. He managed to make a harmonica that wasn't in the right key somehow work throughout the song.
What? How does one do that? I guess
just the way he blows or whatever. But if he was incredible. He came in and he gave it his all, and I think he said something like, to Stevie, like, your voice is too pretty for me.
For more from Thom on his time as a staff engineer at the record plant and as head of A&R at Geffen Records, take a listen to Gear Club episode number 93, available at gearclubpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. In this next excerpt, Toby Scott recounts recording the Dylan album Shot of Love and how one song on the record ended up without any bass.
So, Shot of Love, if we could just take a second.
Bang!
You're killing me. You're killing me. Sorry. Obviously recorded live.
Oh, yeah.
Brutally live.
Yes.
But you must have known that going in, that's how he was going to roll.
Well, yeah, I approached it as we were recording a record. We had musicians. It's one of these where guys nowadays would go, wow. 2 drummers, Jim Keltner, for those who remember him, and Ringo Starr.
Okay. At the same time? No.
At the same time.
Wow.
In the same room, and the room was not much bigger than this room. A little bit longer, about another Clover.
Oh, okay, great.
2 drummers, Tim Drummond, bass player. 3 guitar players. Cooch was one. Taggart, I think, was another, and then there was a third one. Guy Johnson, I think, famous saxophone player. A guy on piano. I think Smitty Smith was on organ. And 3 background singers. And Bob playing either acoustic or electric guitar and singing.
Some electric,
All live.
All live. Wow.
in the same room, and Bob didn't want to use headphones. So I had my headphone amp. I had found these little Fostech speakers or something, and I plugged into them, and it was loud enough so that people could hear the stuff.
He didn't want anyone on headphones.
Right,
just
no one
himself.
was on headphones.
No one.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And we kept a 2-track running all the time.
Right.
And when Bob was with a guitar in his hand and anywhere near a microphone, the multi-track ran. And we just went through the songs and, let's do this. And then we'd go on to others. And, well, here's a great example of another one of my war stories. We were recording a song, and we'd been having a hard time getting it. Done 2 or 3 takes, and it just didn't seem to be turning out correctly. And so we took a little lunch break, and Clover Studios was sort of in the middle of the block, and down at the east end of the block was Ernie's Burrito House. Well, everybody would walk down to Ernie's and have a taco or a burrito or something like that, and then they'd come back. So everybody reconvenes, and we start playing, and right off the bat after lunch, we get this take, and everybody goes, wow, it's great. And following in protocol, I didn't say anything during the take because it was going very well. But at the end of the take, we listened to it and go, wow, it's great. I go, Tim, the bass player, wasn't here. He was still down at Ernie's Burrito House finishing his burrito.
Oops.
And Bob's response was, I guess he wasn't supposed to be on the take.
That's the key.
Chuck was like, oh my God, we've got to put the bass on that. And Bob's terminology for it was, oh, you mean you want to overdo that part? And so when Tim came back, Tim tried to put the bass on it. Bob goes, none of this is working. And I forget which song it was, but one of those songs on there doesn't have a bass on it. And we liked it that way. And so that's the way it was.
For more from Toby, including stories from his time working on hundreds of Bruce Springsteen recordings, take a listen to Gear Club episode number 52, available at gearclubpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Steve Addabbo has been working with Dylan since 2013, mixing live and studio tracks for the Bootleg series, including More Blood, More Tracks and the Time Out of Mind sessions. Listen in as Steve talks with John and Stuart about the ins, outs, and joys of working with these legacy recordings.
The Dylan box sets. They sent you old tapes.
No, they sent me they do the
digitized
transfer. They did almost in 2496.
Right.
So they digitized it and they sent me the masters.
And what was that like, putting the faders up?
You put up a fader, and there's Bob Dylan, And there was one song that I guess early on in the another self-portrait where he does. There's a song. So one day I had him on one fader, George Harrison on the other, and I'm like, yeah, this is a good day. It's just. What do you do? After a while, you get over it and you get on with it. But it's still heavy. It's exciting though to hear the banter behind there and to kind of just hear how things progressed and how great Bob is.
Is there a takeaway from it?
Yeah. No, the takeaway is that after doing, I should be probably in the Guinness World Book of Records at this point for doing the most Dylan mixes ever, because there were at least 1,000 mixes done for just the cutting edge, because there were 450 cues. And by the time we got through mix 5 or 6 to get it through Bob Dylan's office, because it's too loud, vocals too loud. It was a lot of mixing, but through all of it and through every one, it just never ceases to amaze me how on Bob is.
Well, have you seen the Rolling Thunder movie?
Yeah, I just saw it.
And it's the same thing. Every one of his vocal performances.
It just is uncanny. As soon as he starts, I still remember hearing, because we just did More Blood, More Tracks.
You did that?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
More Blood, More Tracks. And, the first time you hear him do Tangled Up in Blue from beginning to end without missing a word,
right.
Take one, it's just like,
and there are some different lyrics too.
Yeah, and
and they're
it
equally as good.
But he's always tweaking. He's always tweaking till the end, till he gets there. So the one takeaway that he is just so on, and when he's just uncannily himself. It never veers from that. We've all worked with artists where they're in a weird mood one day or whatever, and they're not there, but soon as he walks into that place, and I guess that's why he has a reputation of you better be ready.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he's going to get it on the first day.
He's going to get it, whatever.
He's going to get it. If you don't get it, you're dead.
Right.
You know. So
and so the more blood on the tracks,
more blood, more tracks.
More blood. How did that come in? Like as what?
As 2496. Yeah, they do all the transfers. I mean, the masters are kept up in Black Mountain, whatever that thing is called.
Those tracks were those weren't the Phil Ramone tracks, were they?
Yeah,
they were.
Well, there was that and the Minnesota sessions.
Right, and the Phil. So, were they different sounding?
Oh yeah,
different orchestra. Different band.
Yeah, the Phil Ramone stuff started out solo with Bob. Okay, and that's where he just did like Tangled Up in Blue, like straight through. And
at A&R.
Yeah, it's freaking amazing. And then in the afternoon, musicians come, Tony Brown, different, and these guys don't know the songs,
right?
And it's kind of not great, you know. Honestly, you know, it just, you know, they were trying, and you know, having known Phil Ramone and his ways, you know, I'm sure he was up to something, but you know, the stuff with the musicians there wound up. You know, he wound up throwing out most of it. You know, sometimes we'd use the bass, sometimes we just use a bass. A lot of it was just him and Tony Brown. And even Tony Brown is like, you know, is he going to the bridge? Or, you know, you can kind of hear him thinking, you know, where it's going. So, you know, the story goes after listening to it, and they had test pressing, then they had jackets printed up. Bob pulls the plug on it. He goes, he doesn't like it. Doesn't want to put it out. Then his brother goes. His brother go in Minnesota. They were out in Minnesota for the holidays. He goes, why don't you try a couple of days with these guys? And they ran through, you know, 5 more, all the tunes again with the band, and so I got to mix those again too. So that was fun.
Is there ever a moment as a producer and a musician where you go, yeah, maybe I should like fix that guitar? Or
very, very rarely. Only if it's really egregious, and it never really is. There might have been a couple of times, you know, we gave the bass player a break. Right. You know,
I mean, on the reissue stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, it's easy enough to, he went to 4 instead of 5. Right. Let's just fix that. Right. Fuck that. You know, but nothing major. You know, just to keep the flow of Bob. Yeah. You know, that's really our goal. You know,
and Bob
you don't want to distract it.
He listened to all these outtakes, like he okayed, or
we have no idea.
But somebody okayed it.
Oh yeah, well Jeff Rosen is you know, he's the guy. Right. If you got to get it past Jeff, and Jeff's got great ears. He's unbelievable. Right. I mean, he'll come back and tell me shit. He goes, really? And I'll go, okay, yeah, why not? So you know, we'll pull something back, or you know, I've really learned the art of how low can you make a vocal before it's too low.
Mick Jagger.
Yeah, it's true. You know, so but it's been quite the experience from you know, another self-portrait, and you know, then we did, I can't even remember all the box sets, but Cutting Edge, which was bringing it all back home. I mean, that was the freaking holy grail. That thing, those 3 albums.
That's a full band.
Those 3 albums, and it's everything is so varied. And that took us a whole summer.
No shit.
You know, it was a lot. It was, like I said, on the record it's 400. The big box set has 18 CDs, and I mixed all of it. This last one we did now is Dylan, Johnny Cash, and then we have Bob Wooten.
Is that Nashville Skyline time?
Yeah, we did some Nashville stuff. Yeah.
And is there banter?
Oh yeah, there's some. Yeah, there's a lot between him and Bob, and it's funny because they do this one thing. You can't put this out, but they do this one thing where they're singing. The 2 songs they wrote, and they say, and it's a crack up. Oh, we stole it from the same guy. It's literally the same melody, and they're singing the 2 different lyrics. And Bob is singing Johnny's lyric, and Johnny's singing Bobby's lyrics. But it's almost unmixable though, because they're singing 2 different songs at the same time. Right. So how the hell do you do that? You know. Right. So I spread them a little bit, so but it's like they didn't put it on the record because it really actually doesn't work. But it is pretty funny, you know.
But not just the banter on that one, but on all the other stuff.
You know, there's not a lot. You know, there's sometimes, you know, Bob doesn't say a lot in those sessions. You know, and there's one time on. And this you can use because it's already out, but I think it's on. I don't know. I forget which one, but it might have been More Blood, More Tracks. And he goes, Mick's on the phone. And Bob goes, Mick ho. Jagger.
Very-
Jagger. No,
Nick Ralph.
It's Phil Ramone going Jagger. And so then the next thing you hear, this stuff's all around. You hear Mick is in the studio now with Bob, and he's telling Bob he should play slide guitar on something, and Bob goes, I don't know, I don't think so. So he goes, no, try it. So Bob plays with slide guitar, and it's fucking awful, right? And so then you hear Mick go, oh, maybe some harp would be good. Oh, like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it was funny, but yeah.
Do you think that maybe, like, when they made the transfers, they obviously ran the reels? Do you think they cut stuff out that they didn't want?
No,
it had to be everything.
No. We everything's in the reel. You know, Rosen makes decisions like, I don't want to hear him say that. You know, and they take that out, and I mean, he won't let him curse.
Right.
Not that he ever does. I mean, he does rarely. You know, but once in a while, I said, "Now take that out. Take that word out." And I fucked that one up. He won't let that out. But other than that, it's pretty much. You know, it's not like there's a lot of. You know, it's not like Bob goes into telling stories about the songs or anything.
He's not doing an Art Garfunkel.
Oh no,
Joe Perry. Not Joe Perry. The producer, Richard Perry.
No, none of those legendary tapes. No, none of that really. Bob's very, very businesslike and just. These are my songs. This is Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And it's. I have so much more respect now than I always did. But you know, after going through all the stuff, 6 box sets now. You know, I guess Dylan likes it because they keep calling me back, and we get it done, and there's good communication between us and Rosen, and he gets what he wants. The performances were so good and focused that he just really had to present it. And, you know, the early stuff that Ramone did, you know, I always felt Phil was kind of a defensive engineer. He covered his tracks at all times. So there's a main mic, but he always had another mic somewhere else. You know, it's just in case, I don't know, for whatever. And so, you know, to try to use him, but there's so much phasey shit going on. You don't really, you know, you couldn't really use a lot of it. So, you know, especially, but once in a while you hear it still on, you know, I still hear a couple. I just couldn't quite get rid of it, but it's like whatever, you know.
To listen to Steve's full interview, where he talks about building his studio Shelter Island Sound and producing seminal records for Suzanne Vega and Sean Colvin, check out Gear Club episode number 61, available at gearclubpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
For extras from the episodes, like playlists, links, and videos, head over to gearclubpodcast.com. Sign up for the newsletter, and come say hi and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Gear Club Podcast. Thanks for listening.
And please, if you like what you hear, let us know and leave a review.